Hey YouTube, it's Charlie from Reader and Writer. Today, let's chat. Are ideas cheap? This video is going to be a lot more laid back. I'm not going to have my bullet journal. I just kind of want to explore the idea, are ideas cheap or are they actually really important? Because I've heard both sides of the concept, argument, whatever, since before I joined BookTube even, or AuthorTube or anything like that. There are a lot of people who think that ideas are really important, that if you have that $1 million idea, then your book or whatever you're creating is going to take off because the idea was super great. And there are other people who are saying that ideas are cheap. Don't worry about people stealing your ideas, you can always come up with another one. Ideas are a dime a dozen. You can't pitch an idea because it's not really the idea, it's how you execute on it. All these ideas have been before. You can never come up with a unique idea because it's been done before by someone else and you just have to take your unique take on it. All of those things are technically true. So in a way, ideas are kind of cheap because if you can't execute well on an idea, then your idea doesn't actually matter. And yes, if someone else takes your idea, then you can come up with another really great idea and use that one instead. And yes, a lot of ideas have been done before. But ideas aren't actually as cheap as some people would say they are, because they are actually kind of really, really important. Even though all of those things are true, you still need to have a good idea if you are creating something and you want to market it to someone else. If you're writing for fun or just for practice, then you can basically take whatever idea you want because it's just for you. And that works just fine. And there are people who can take an idea that is not that great or maybe more commonplace, and they can do it better than anyone else, and that sets them apart. And so their idea doesn't have to be as unique or fantastic or $1 million-y because their skill is high enough that they can execute well on anything. But I would say I don't consider myself one of those people. I don't think I can write a book better than 99% of the authors out there. And 99% of the authors out there can't write a book better than 99% of the authors, or the math doesn't work. And so ideas are actually really important, especially if you want to make a career in writing and you want to set yourself apart and have people notice your book in the sea of all of the books that are out there. Whether you publish through traditionally or self-publish, there are so many books to pick from that you will just drown and get lost unless you have a way to differentiate yourself. I kind of touch on this a little bit in my video on purple cows and how you use those to brainstorm ideas. Another word that my husband and I use for purple cows when we just talk about ourselves is hooks. It doesn't encapsulate the idea as well because a purple cow is the unexpected plus the expected, and you combine them in a way so that people get the anticipation of what you're talking about, and they have the structure where they're like, okay, I recognize that. I'm not like, oh my gosh, what's going on? But they also have that surprise element where they're like, how would those two things work together? And they want to look closer and they want to find out what it would be like, how you execute well on it. It piques their interest and it hooks them in, which is why my husband and I call them hooks, because it's a little bit easier to talk about it that way. There are obviously some hooks that are better than others. There are some really great hooks, like the selection series was The Bachelor meets The Hunger Games, which were both very popular items, and they meshed them together in a way that made it so that we could have some of the elements of both of those that we really liked, but they were put together so then we're like, ooh, how is that going to work? And it did really, really well. The idea was a $1 million idea. It was a great idea. And there are obviously some hooks that aren't as well. There are a lot of times that people take something that's really popular and they'll basically theme it. They think that's a change, but it actually doesn't change anything. Like, it's Hunger Games, but in space. Well, does that actually change the story at all? Not really. But there are some things that you could take and put in space and it might actually change the story quite a bit. Like if you take a classic and you put it, a classic love story, and you put it in space, there are ways that that can actually really impact the actual plot. The point of everything I've been saying is that some ideas actually are better than others. A unique idea is going to be better than others, and it is hard to find a unique idea because there has been so many things done. But if you take something that's already been done and you put a twist on it, you find a way to meaningfully change it so that the reader's like, how would that change work with what I already know and already like? Then your idea is going to be a lot better than saying, well, it's just Harry Potter again, but you know, I'm just redoing Hunger Games I'm just doing another Hunger Games book, and then you have small changes that aren't actually meaningful, it's going to be a lot better. Or even just saying, you know, you don't even take Harry Potter into the picture, but you say, okay, I'm going to do a book about a boy who goes to wizarding school. Well, the first thing everyone's going to think of is Harry Potter because it's been done. You have to find a twist. You have to find a way to make it unique. Whether that's changing the perspective or changing the genre or changing, I don't know, you have to find a way to change it in a way that really impacts the story so that it's a new story for us rather than just your version of Harry Potter, even if it's actually different because it's such a generic idea that's been done before. And so that idea, a boy goes to wizarding school, is no longer actually a good idea. It's fine to write it, but it's not going to do very well unless you are a really, really good author and you can convince people to try it to show them that you're actually a really good author. Where if you have a really good idea using a hook, then you're going to be able to convince your readers to give you a chance, and they are probably going to like it a lot more because it's something new and we all like novelty. The other thing that impacts whether an idea is actually good or not is if the idea is good for you, because there are actually a lot of really good ideas out there and a lot of people have them, but maybe it's not actually a good idea for you to write it. Maybe it's a really good hook idea that you have, but it's in a genre that you don't like to write or one that you don't read a lot. Maybe you're just not a very experienced writer yet, so you're not ready to write a book and execute well on such a good hook. Maybe there are areas of expertise, like maybe you have a non-fiction book idea that's a really good idea, but you don't actually have experience in that field. It has to be a good idea that lines up with being good for you in order to be a really good idea. And when you can find those, that's when you say, this is a really good idea and I'm going to run with it. Just a quick story. My husband is a game developer. We're both really creative and we've always been creative together, and so we've talked about this idea if ideas are cheap or not. And we're always on the side of yes, ideas are cheap because they're a dime a dozen. Anyone can have ideas. Everyone has ideas. Even people who don't write books have book ideas. And you'll have them tell them to you as you are like at family parties or something, right? I mean, Ben gets so many emails asking him to make games for people. They're like, I have this brilliant idea. All I need is someone to program it and make the game. And you're like, no, I'm not gonna make your game for you. We really like deck building games, and my husband really likes roguelikes. It's just a certain type of video game. He had this idea that roguelikes and deck building games would go really well together, so he wanted to make a roguelike video game that was also a deck builder. And he had this idea quite a few years ago, and it had never been done before. And so he actually started working on it. And as he worked on it, of course, there were problems with it because every idea has problems with it. And he stopped working on it. And about a year later, a deck building roguelike came out. I'm trying to remember the name of it. Something Spire, maybe? Man, I'm not a video game person, even though my husband makes video games. Slay the Spire. That's what it is. So Slay the Spire came out, and it was a deck building roguelike. And at first it didn't do super well, but by the time it had gained momentum, it had made a couple $1 million. And they didn't like steal the idea from my husband, right? Like lots of people have the same ideas, right? That's part of what makes ideas cheap, is lots of people have the same ideas. But it was kind of disheartening because it was like, okay, you know, what if he had finished his game and then it did as well as Slay's? Like, what if he had been able to finish the game because he was working on it and probably could have gotten it out before Slay the Spire had come out if he hadn't decided to set the project aside because of the problems that he was running into. We'll never know. Maybe he would have done that and it would have done as well, and Slay the Spire still would have really done well because that happens, you know. But it was $1 million idea. Literally made millions. It was just an interesting experience for us because it really showed that ideas, one of the reasons that ideas are cheap is because you have to execute on them. You have to finish and do well and market it and all of that stuff, or it will literally not do anything for you. And it was a good lesson for us. Now my husband knows to just push through the problems because Slay the Spire actually had a lot of the same problems that he was running into design-wise, and they did just fine even though they had those problems. You know, it was a really good learning experience for us, and it really illustrated the idea that ideas are cheap, because unless you put the work behind them, then they're not going to go anywhere. And anyone can have the same idea as you and execute well on it. So if you have a good idea, you want to execute on it quickly so that you can get it out there before someone else gets it out there. But it was also a good lesson in showing that ideas are actually not cheap, because ideas can be million-dollar ideas. Ideas are really important. If you don't have a great idea, if your idea is just generic and average, then why are you creating this? If you're trying to get it out to other people, you need to create something that is going to spark their interests and hold their interests. And even if you're the best writer in the world, if people don't want to pick up your book, then no one's going to read it. And one of the best ways to start marketing is by coming up with a unique idea, with coming up with an idea that is $1 million idea and running with it. And of course it doesn't have to be $1 million idea. Maybe it's a $100 idea. Maybe it's an idea that is kind of generic, but kind of not. My current book that I'm writing does not have a super strong hook. The next book I'm writing has a better hook. But the one I'm currently writing is a Rapunzel retelling, and it's dystopian, slightly dystopian. It actually doesn't take place too far in the future, so it's very similar to our time. But it is dystopian, where they have genetic modifications, and that explains why her hair is strong. Her hair is genetically modified. And it does change the story in some ways, but it's not a super strong hook, because it's kind of like, okay, I can see that. And it's been really good for me though to write it as my first book, to practice. I might try and publish it still, I'm not sure yet. And it's okay to write books or make games or whatever you're creating, make videos that are more generic, that don't have a super strong hook. But the stronger you can make your hook, the better it is, because then the more interest it will garner as you are trying to publish it and sell it and market it, just naturally because of the idea. So are ideas cheap? Well, yes, in some ways they are, but in others they are incalculably valuable. So if you find a good idea, one that you think a lot of people will have a lot of interest in, and you're in a place where you can run with it, then run with it. It's not actually as easy to come up with ideas that mesh in both those places as you would think. Also, just keep brainstorming. If someone does something that is your idea, find a new idea. If your idea doesn't take off, find another idea. And that's part of why ideas, it's actually kind of a good thing that ideas are cheap, because you can come up with tons of ideas and you'll be able to eventually hit on one that is a really good idea. So those are my thoughts. I would love to hear what you think in the comments below. I think this topic is a really interesting one because it is not just black and white. So I would love to have a discussion with you, or get a discussion going down in the comments below. I really love to hear from you. If you like this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe for more content like this. I do a lot of writing content every week. And thank you so much for watching my video. I will see you in the next one.